Welcome to the Mac for the Blind Spring 2024 online courses. This is course number one. This is a free course, which is kind of it's if you don't have to have taken the full courses, and I wanted to stress that in my announcement email. It helps to go through these next four courses after this, but because it's sort of a continuation of the things that I didn't cover back in the fall. But this is going to be kind of a lecture more than me demonstrating anything to anybody at this point, because I want to deal with some myths, some misconceptions, some FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that I've really seen prevailing in the blindness community, which I directly, personally, and again, let me just be upfront here. This is going to be a lot of my opinion. I am not the end all be all when it comes to assistive technology. These are John's personal opinions, but also keep in mind that I've been in this industry for 33 years, close to 33 years as a reseller, and now as a trainer for the last 14 or 15. And my background, for those of you who are not familiar with me, goes back to using Windows way back when the Power Braille from TSI, when Windows 3.1 came out, when everybody cried and complained and screamed about having to leave DOS. I went through Slimware Window Bridge. I was a beta tester and one of the pioneers before the gentleman who developed passed away. I jumped over to Window Eyes, but I've been using JAWS. I used a little bit of Outspoken. I played with other screen readers over the years. I still teach Windows. This is something that I think people don't understand, or maybe it's just not made clear to them. I have been teaching Windows for several years, even before I got involved with the Mac. I have several contracts in which I do teach Windows to clients. So my point about mentioning that is that my perspective and my opinions are not simply being pulled out of thin air. This comes from experience. This comes from having taught both Mac and Windows, and having been a Windows user since 1992 and being a Mac user full time since 2005, 2006. So I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience when it comes to this. So I'm not just speaking from hearsay or guessing. And again, it's opinion. So you take it for what it's worth. I am not the guru or, whatever when it comes to this stuff. This is just coming from what I've experienced over the years. And let me also say that I am not at all criticizing, abusing, degrading, whatever, any other company or screen reader. And, my philosophy as a blind user, and I know some people will openly or privately accuse me of being an Apple fanboy. I make no apologies for pushing Apple and for speaking highly of Apple's commitment to accessibility over the last nearly 20 years. But when the day is done, I am a blind assistive technology user. So I am open-minded, as much as some people may not think I am. Windows served me and still serves me in some ways over the years. It isn't that I hate Microsoft or I hate Vispero or anything like that. That's a bunch of nonsense. I have all the respect and admiration in the world for everybody who provides and offers solutions for us as blind people. I just want to, really go through this particular lesson, explaining some or clarifying some things that I've alarmingly read or encountered or has been sent to me via various sources, such as blogs. Now, blogs, let's just be clear about blogs. Anybody can blog. You do not have to be a technology expert. Anybody can blog on any subject. You see it all over the place. People who blog about sports, who know virtually nothing about sports, or their opinions seem to come out of their backsides. Okay? You see blogs on politics, same thing. People who know nothing about politics, know nothing about the history of this country or the world, who will profess knowledge on all. Same thing happens when it comes to blind people and assistive technology. The internet offers a vehicle for people to basically state their opinions, and they can do so anonymously or with basically the belief or the feeling that they're anonymous, or they can say whatever they want. What they call that, screaming from one's keyboard or complaining from one's keyboard, whatever term you want to fit in here. So let's start with VoiceOver as far as what it sets out, what Apple has it set out to do in relations to a Windows screen reader like JAWS or NVDA or Dolphin. So when the day is done, these are screen readers. They set out to provide a blind person the information necessary for them to use their specific computer or operating system. In that regard, there is no difference in terms of what your expectation should be as far as what that product delivers to you as a blind person. So if you're using a Mac, you're going to be using VoiceOver to provide you with that information. If you're using a PC, you can choose JAWS, you can choose NVDA, you can choose Dolphin, whatever you want. If you still got window eyes laying around, you're not going to have it developed anymore, but I still know a few people out there that are continuing to use window eyes regardless. So these companies set out to provide products that will provide a blind person the ability and access to their computers via speech output or braille output or a combination of both. Now, make no mistakes about what this has meant for us as blind people over the years. It has provided us with an education opportunity in many cases. I still have a lot of clients today who are in college or even high school who are able to keep up with their fellow classmates and complete their tasks and assignments and pass and go on to careers because of their assistive technology. I have clients who are employed or are on the verge of being employed who this assistive technology is just, you can't put a price on it as far as what it's going to enable them to do as far as making a living for themselves. So in the end, when you take the grand scheme of things, these products are doing what they're supposed to do. Now, as I've said to people on public lists and privately, if you want to take the time and go out there and criticize any company or any product for bugs, for what you feel in your personal humble, should be humble but it's not so much the case with some people out there, opinions that a company's not, quote, doing enough for us blind people, that's your business. But you should not make it into like a federal case or a universal case. If you don't like the way Apple is doing things, or you don't like the way that JAWS does things, that's your opinion. And let's not mistake opinion with reality. So as far as Apple goes, again, for those of you who don't know my background, I have had a lot of contact and a lot of experience dealing with Apple accessibility, going back to 2005 when Mary Beth Janes and Mike Shabanik were involved with Apple. So I have been contracted directly with Apple to provide quality assurance for Apple.com for approximately 9 months, and I've been contracted to teach Apple employees VoiceOver on several occasions over the years. I know people inside of Apple Accessibility who are part of the VoiceOver team, and I know the commitment to accessibility that Apple has. And this nonsense that I've been reading about that Apple doesn't care anymore, and these bugs that keep continuing to exist and blah, blah, blah. Apple doesn't do anything about it. Apple's not listening to us. Apple this, Apple that. It's all a bunch of nonsense. And I'm saying that politely because there is another term, but I will refrain from saying it. So again, bugs occur regardless of what software, what platform you're dealing with. You got millions and millions of lines of code being developed by hundreds, if not thousands of people working in different areas of a company to provide support and, enhancements, bugs, fixes, etc. So inevitably, you're going to have bugs. There is never going to be, and mark my words, there's never going to be a situation in which macOS or Windows is going to be perfect for accessibility. There are going to be bugs in iOS. There are going to be bugs in Android. It doesn't matter. It's just going to happen. It's a reality that we all, even sighted people, have to deal with. So when bugs occur, or you don't personally think a bug is getting fixed fast enough, that's, a matter of opinion. Are there bugs that exist in Mac and in Windows and iOS that I don't particularly like, or that I am amazed that have not been squashed? Absolutely. But I'm a realist. I understand that this stuff is a process and it will get fixed at some point. Unfortunately, another reality of the way software works is when there are improvements, when there are enhancements, when there are advances, things break. You see it with iOS apps, you see it with Mac apps, where a developer puts out an update and all of a sudden, all over the email lists, people are screaming about bugs being introduced. And of course, you want to bring it to the attention of developers. You want people to understand that there are bugs that exist and there are bugs that affect you personally, but you don't need to make it into the sky's falling. I wish I had $1 for every time I've read on an Apple email list, a blind person come out and say, Apple doesn't care about us anymore. Apple's dropping the ball. Mac OS is degrading. Mac OS is this, iOS is that. I wish I had $1 because I'd be doing this lecture from a beach with a drink with an umbrella in it right now, catching sun rays while I'm talking here, because that's how many times I've heard it over the years. So in reality, it's just something that we are going to have to deal with. So when I read something about a few months ago, which I, was kind of amused by the fact of how many people felt it necessary to send me links to somebody's blog post about how Apple, Mac OS, I'm leaving the Mac, I'm going back to Windows because Apple, blah, 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 Safari, blah, blah, blah. I just shake it off because, again, I could turn around and I could write a similarly vitriol article about Windows or about whatever. I can write about any car company. I can write about other stuff that I'm dealing with that has nothing to do with blindness technology. I could write an equally offensive blog post if I wanted to just set up my own blog for that case. So, it's the old, matter of perspective. If you are a beta tester and you are beta testing for Mac, if you're beta testing for iOS, if you're beta testing for Freedom or Vispero, Freedom Scientific, you understand that you deal with bugs, you report those bugs, and not all of those bugs are ever cured through a product release, and it might be fixed the next major update. That's just the way the technology world works. So my point is with people is I'm not saying you have to take it laying down. I'm not saying that you shouldn't report it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't consult with one another on email lists, but there is professional and courteous ways that you can approach these things. And it just bothers me when I see people just basically acting out on their keyboards on public lists and saying things that they have no inside information about, or it's speculation and opinion only, and it has no basis in reality. And again, as I said, I have dealt enough with the Apple accessibility people over the years to be 100% convinced that they are dedicated to making a product that is beneficial and that works for us. And if they had their druthers, there would be no bugs. It's not like they sit around going, ah, ha, ha, drinking coffee while people send in bug reports and go, oh, we'll get to that next week. Oh, I'm going to take a nap right now and maybe I'll take a look at that person's bug report. That's not how it works. They are aware of the bugs. They have an engineering team that does escalate things and prioritize things. And unfortunately, things don't always get fixed, maybe fast enough for our liking, but they do get fixed. And it's just patience and, being a realist. And maybe I have a different perspective because I've been in this industry for so long. And I used to sell products and I used to have to deal with, bugs in products and people's complaints and all that stuff. But I can tell you, knowing a lot of these people inside Apple personally, It's just, it really does bother me when I see some of the nonsense that gets spewed on these lists as if Apple doesn't care anymore. Now, one of the questions I get from people who are coming over from Windows and either are making the move to the Mac or want both sort of experience in both worlds is, does my previous screen reader experience make a difference to me? Should, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there is, I guess, an expectation or belief among some blind people that because they've used JAWS or NVDA or Window Eyes for X amount of years, that somehow precludes that they are going to be able to pick up the Mac like that. It does not work that way. Some people are technology gifted, I guess, or technology savvy, or I like to call them, technology whisperers. And these are the people that blow me away because, I know sometimes people think that because I'm a trainer, and I think Cliff may come across this as well, where you get people who simply believe that you've rolled out of the womb with this special superpower, that you know this stuff like the back of your hand, you picked it up in 30 seconds. And that's not what happened. For me, learning Windows back in the day was an absolute struggle that I think psychologically still has left scars on me. Learning the Mac was not a picnic. It took me a long time to get, to become one with my Mac, I guess. I went kicking and screaming in a lot of ways doing things with my Mac before it happened. iOS, I can still remember getting my iPhone 3GS and the first week or two trying to learn it and saying to myself, what the heck am I doing? Why don't I go back to my Nokia with talks? Because this is ridiculous. It takes time and it takes effort. Yes, having previous screen reader experience does help in certain ways. Conceptually, yes. Understanding that there is some similarity, some reference points that are similar as far as, when I teach people Mac and I throw out, different things like, the toolbar, Finder is like File Explorer in Windows, or the dock and the toolbar, a taskbar in Windows. And I try to do sometimes with keyboard commands that have similarities, like insert T and doing VOFF2 for the identifying the window title on the Mac. So as an instructor or a trainer, I try to keep in mind if I'm working with a person who has Windows experience, that I can sort of dovetail things in for reference points to hopefully make either the transition or the learning experience, easier for that individual. But you got to remember something, and I say this all the time to my new clients. I don't care if you've used Windows for 5 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. You're learning a new operating system, Mac OS, which is not at all like Windows 11, Windows 10, whatever. And you're learning a brand new screen reader, VoiceOver. It is different from JAWS or NVDA. It is not a bolt-on third-party screen reader that works on top of the operating system. This is a screen reader or screen access solution that is part of the operating system. It is developed and supported by Apple. When there are advances to Mac OS, sure enough, there's going to be additional advances to VoiceOver. There are no separate VoiceOver updates. There is no SMAs involved as a VoiceOver user. VoiceOver is available on every Mac, every iOS device out of the box. You can walk into an Apple store and you can fire up Mac OS on any Apple device. I do this all the time at the Smith Haven Mall Apple store and here up at the Galleria Mall in East Amherst. I like to go in there with my brothers and just turn on VoiceOver and just kind of play with it a little bit. Just, especially if I'm looking at a Mac that I don't have or an iPad model that I just am curious to see what it's like. So that is a big advantage as far as like a user of Apple products, and also the carryover, the ecosystem. I hear people kind of scoff at the Apple ecosystem. Oh, you don't want to get caught up in the Apple ecosystem. That's bad. you're going to become a mindless robot or something like that. I'll tell you what, though, the Apple ecosystem offers so many advantages that you don't have as a Windows user. And I don't care if you use the iCloud app in Windows and you have the ability to sync your material, some of your material, your contacts and such over to Windows. It is not the same experience that you have, the same, seamless stuff that you get being an Apple user, where you can go from an iPhone to a Mac to an iPad and have all of your most important materials, such as like your contacts, your reminders, your calendars, even your files, so easily available to you on all of those products. And it is so much easier to teach somebody Mac and iOS back to back. I don't understand to this day why so many state agencies still give me clients where they're Windows users and they want me to teach them iOS, or they're iOS users and they want me to teach them Windows, when it's just so much easier for the client to be able to use the same company's operating system. VoiceOver may not be exactly alike on the iPhone or the Mac, but there is enough similarity, there is enough seamlessness to them that it's really easier to teach a user both of those operating system in a matter of a few months of consistent training. Now, I will say this as a trainer. So again, I am not seeking to criticize or degrade anybody, but I will tell you, as an instructor who has done this for the last 15 years and has worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients, it is far easier for me to teach a person Mac and VoiceOver than it is to teach Windows and JAWS. It's just a simple fact. And I think that has to do with two reasons. Number one, Windows is such a pain in the neck. And Windows is, I don't care what Microsoft has done with the user account controls, et cetera, et cetera. Windows gets in the way of everything you do. Mac OS, yeah, do you get these prompts here and there, given permission to, let them Zoom have access to the microphone or the camera, et cetera. But that's very straightforward stuff. Windows, it seems when I go over to use Windows, I spend far more time dealing with Windows and fighting with Windows than actually getting the task done that I'm actually going over there to do. And that's just from experience over the years. It's just really strange. And I think the other sort of part of that equation, again, totally John's opinion here, going back to Freedom Scientific and Vispero, whatever you want to call it, I think that they've sort of forgotten what a screen reader is supposed to do. It's as if they want JAWS to do much more than just provide, the details and the information to a blind user. And I know there's people out there scrambling and telling Apple, oh, you gotta do this like JAWS does, and you gotta do this like JAWS does, and you gotta do that like JAWS does. I hope and pray that Apple does not make VoiceOver into this monstrosity, this cumbersome behemoth that JAWS has become, with layered commands. And I always jokingly say to people when a new version of JAWS comes out that I think the next version is going to have a built-in coffee maker where, you can buy from Freedom or at Vispero, these special coffee whatever, and virtual coffee pot, K-cups or something, and you can make coffee for yourself. Because at this point, I think they wanted to do everything. So I really am of the mind personally that Apple just stays true to the course and just makes VoiceOver a viable screen reader that gives us access to the apps and the features of macOS, and works out to the point in which even if we're dealing with an inaccessible app that a developer has totally fumbled, that the AI component of VoiceOver will get to the point where it will sort of give us the ability to work around those shortcomings of developers. And I honestly believe that the way this is going, if you've noticed with the image descriptions and all that stuff, that the way AI is being integrated, it is one of the positive aspects of AI that I can definitely see that will benefit us blind users. I jokingly tell people, look at the movie Terminator and Skynet, and it's becoming, to me, more like science fiction could be reality in the next 5 or 10 years. And Interestingly enough, as a side note, Terminator was on one of the channels up here the other night, and 2029 is the indicator of Skynet taking over the world. So I kind of got a kick out of that, thinking that it's 2024 and the way that AI is sort of accelerating and being used in so many areas. But again, from the perspective of us as blind users, I think it's going to benefit, voiceover users quite a bit, as it is already with voiceover's image descriptions that truly blow me away. One of the things that I do on occasion is PDF images. Usually you have to, convert them, use optical character recognition to get access to those images. Well, should say VO Shift L on an image. If you open that image up in preview, if the text is readable, VoiceOver will read it to you. It's not the same as saving it as converted text, but if you just need quick access to a PDF that you're not really needing to save for any reason. I just did this the other day with something my sister-in-law sent me in regards to stuff going on with my treatments and ideas and stuff. And it was pretty cool because it read to me the whole pamphlet from
John, I hate to do
Roswell.
this because I hate giving Microsoft credit for anything. But because I use Office for Windows for work every day, well, 5 days a week, they do have this thing in the context menu now where you can either open it up in PDF with Adobe, or it will actually scan the text for you directly into a Word document so you can read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have tried that, Cliff. It doesn't work all the
really?
time. Some things it works well, like
Okay, I'm
some
on the
other things
latest
it
build of
doesn't.
JAWS 24, so I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes a
I'll have to
difference,
try it
but
again, but I had some stuff for one of my clients that I was trying to help them with, and it just would not, like, all it would
and
do is
maybe my
hang.
job has always sent me stuff that was perfect text. You might have got something that was actually an image and it didn't work, but I
Yeah.
can't speak for the image because if JAWS doesn't tell you what it is, it'll just open it up and scan the text and put it into a Word document for me. So maybe
Yeah, I know
because
it,
I
it,
mean,
it
because Dargan has went
theoretically can
above and
do that.
beyond for me and made sure everything's accessible. I mean, even when there's presentations, they put readable text in the slides so JAWS can read it. So they went above and beyond for the accessibility over there at Target. But other than that, but I just wanted to throw that in there about that because a lot of people don't know that that's built in. That if you
Yeah, there's the layered commands. You have OCR on demand, and if you hit the letter W, it'll convert into a Word document. Like it's worked for me with, for example, my manual for my Hammer keyboard. It did a great job of converting that into a Word document. But I've had other PDFs, like I just had this experience with a client a couple of weeks ago who was sending me these PDFs that they got for potential jobs. I could not get it to work. I had to actually OCR it on my Mac because I don't have OpenBook or Kurzweil 1000 on this PC with me. So I just used DocuScan and it converted it into a RTF document I saved and sent back to them. So again, I'm not trying to take anything away from, from Jaws. I just have not personally had the kind of success that I know some people have talked about. And it could be, as Cliff just said, the types of PDFs that I'm trying to do this with. But I really do like the image description stuff where I don't even have to do any conversion. I can just do VO Shift L and it will read me like it read me the Roswell pamphlet from top to bottom without me having to convert it into OCR, even using OCR to convert it into text, readable text. So that's really just the point that my point here is that AI is going to, I think, get to the point in which we really are going to benefit quite a bit. And I think this is also going to go into the realm of, um, you know, mobility as far as like us traveling on our own without the need for sighted assistance where we can find, you know, let's say a store in a mall or the ladies' room or the men's room, without needing to ask somebody for help, going through an airport or going, wandering through a new neighborhood and having the ability to kind of know what's around you. And you're already starting to see this with some of the apps that are available for the iPhone. But I think it's just going to get better and better as time passes. And I think AI, one of the positive aspects of AI is going to be directly related to that. All right, so as we continue here, myths and misconceptions, I do want to address a couple of these things because this goes back and it still kind of triggers a very comical situation that I experienced years ago when I first started using a Mac. And my personal feelings, and maybe, and I don't think it's changed significantly, but I think back in the past, I think a lot of Windows vendors, people who were doing blindness stuff that directly related to Windows and even users were sort of panicked by the potential of what Apple was doing with VoiceOver. And you got these crazy myths. And I remember there was an article the AFB put up, which really surprised me as a professional organization, where this particular writer made claims about the Mac not having a spell checker and not being able to customize voiceover and all these crazy things that were in this article that were just truly unverifiable and were just lies, bold-faced lies. And I still hear some of these come up from people from time to time. And, and I just had this experience, and I don't want to get into too much detail. I'll just say it's a company that specializes in teaching people web accessibility. And I had a client that was told that she could only take the course using JAWS because VoiceOver does not do the web well, and blind people don't use Macs. That's basically what she was told in an email that was copied to me. And I just laugh because I've been accessibility testing for Mac and Windows and getting paid to do so for over a dozen years by a specific company that has me investigate reports of inaccessible websites. And I can tell you that you can do web accessibility testing just as effectively as you can do in Windows. And I don't know who started that absolutely idiotic belief, but it certainly gave me a laugh. But it also kind of reminded me of the fact that you still get people out there who want to tell people, the rest of the other blindness community users out there, that, oh, the Mac, you can't do the things that you can do in Windows and JAWS that you can do on the Mac. Realistically, unless, and I qualify with this, that there is still some companies out there that insist or engage in using proprietary software that is specific to Windows. And those instances, yes, you can make a case that you may not have the same access to that software because it's specifically designed for the Windows platform. And I have currently working with a client that is facing that situation, though we are skillfully finding some alternative Mac applications that he can use to work around the shortcomings of his company's choices. But realistically, Office is available on the Mac, and it's available, in an accessible format as of 2016 or whenever it was, the version that came out that Microsoft finally made it accessible. And to Microsoft's credit, the accessibility people, if you contact the accessibility hotline, they do have some Mac specialists that are extraordinarily uh, gifted, or whatever you want to call it, technology versed, and they really are very helpful. The documentation that Microsoft provides for the accessibility, knowledge base is really well done. Do I think Pages is still more accessible than Microsoft Word? Yes, I think there are aspects of Pages, but Word is certainly improved drastically. Um, Excel is, in fairness, I'm not an Excel user on the Mac. I haven't spent a lot of time. I use it in Windows. I don't like spreadsheets, and that's just personal. I use very basic spreadsheets. I've had to work with clients who use very advanced spreadsheets, but Numbers does the job, as far as I'm concerned, equally well as I've experienced with Excel on the Windows platform. I can't speak, as I said, strictly to how well Excel works as, on the Mac area, because I guess I just have not had enough clients really ask me that I've had to learn it and really play with it beyond just to code it, sort of a cursory look at it. And I don't know enough to really make I'm not going to say it's inaccessible compared, I'm not going to say anything like that because I don't know. But the point here is that Office products are available. You have Braille translation software that is available. You have OCR that is available. So all these myths that I still hear on occasion from people that say, you can't do this on the Mac, you can't do that on the Mac. They really have to catch up. And I jokingly call it the 1990s mentality of some state counselors because I still run across this where even younger counselors do not seem to understand what the Mac can do, and they kind of work their attitudes or beliefs off of whatever they've read in, again, in blogs or whatever. And again, is the Mac a perfect solution for everybody? No, but neither is Windows. And when the day is done, the tool that you use really comes down to what gets the job done for you as a blind person, whether you're a student or whether you are a person working and needs that computer access. I know plenty of people who have to use Windows for work, but when they come home, they're Mac users, including one of my best friends who's an IT administrator for a big company here on Long Island. He has to use Windows at work. They do have Mac users, but what he got hired to do was mainly on the Windows side. But when he goes home, he uses an iPhone, he uses a MacBook Pro, and he uses iPad and an Apple Watch. He doesn't touch Windows at home. And I know a lot of people like that. So another myth that I also want to dispel is this idea that the workplace is 100% Windows. That is not at all true anymore. Apple has very strategically made partnerships with IBM, with of course, Oracle, with various mainstream companies out there and especially the inroads that the iOS platform has given companies, especially with security, has made the Mac a very viable solution for a lot of companies. In fact, a lot of companies use a new policy that is called bring your own device. So in other words, their IT staff, as my friend Rick has to know both Mac and Windows because as long as you can get the job done with a Mac, they don't care. It's not like everything has to be Windows and Windows only. It's a lot of companies are actually doing that. And I got to tell you, I think I've said this to a few people privately, and I've said this on public lists. As a trainer in the last 5 years, the number of Mac clients that I've gotten from state agencies who are using Macs in the work environment has increased far more than I could have expected. Again, I'm not saying that Mac is taking over the enterprise world, but if you look at the numbers, if you read, like I am a geek when it comes to this stuff, Mac has very quickly started to rival Windows, Microsoft in the enterprise area. And again, it comes down to the partnerships and things that Apple's been doing that doesn't necessarily get the attention, I guess, of the mainstream media. In fact, it's really interesting that to me, years ago, Microsoft was the whipping boy for the media, and they were sort of the joke. Everybody used to criticize anytime there was a problem with Windows, anytime something Microsoft made a blunder, you saw it all over the technology news. And it's really funny how now Apple has kind of become sort of the whipping boy in the sense that anytime there's a problem and there's a major issue that is totally blown out there by the media, it's always like a negative thing about Apple. And I guess it just comes down to that old adage. It's like if you're a sports fan and your team wins the championship multiple times over a period of time, like the New England Patriots, for example, or the Yankees, where people just start to hate them simply because they get that much attention. It's like celebrities sometimes who are all over the news where people just get to the point where it just gets them sick. Like the Taylor Swift effect is starting to have on some people who are getting tired of hearing about her. So the same thing I think happens in technology as well. And I think Apple has sort of become a victim of that success, being whatever the first, or they keep rivaling back and forth, but in terms of the biggest companies in the world as far as like sales and all that stuff goes. So I think that kind of comes with the territory that you sort of, when you reach the top of the mountain, people want to knock you off and they'll do anything to knock you off. So Another myth that I want to address, which directly comes from a recent blog, one of the things that this individual is writing about in the blog was about Safari and that Safari's unusable and that, it's, let's take a step back here. If you are a longtime blind screen reader user, you know that the web is an adventure. It's a jungle. I always say to people, regardless of what operating system and platform and screen reader I'm teaching them, is that being a blind screen reader user is like going into the Amazon with a hand machete as far as getting on the web, because it really doesn't come down to the screen reader, the platform, etc., your skill level. It comes down to the simple reality that there is still a lot of inaccessible websites out there. And the reality is VoiceOver and JAWS are pretty much equal in terms of what access they give you and what access they can't give you. You just do it in different ways. You're only as good with your computer as a blind person, as good as you are with the screen reader. In other words, if you've used JAWS for 20 years and you use the Mac for 2 months, you can't go on to a blog or whatever or tell your friends that, oh, JAWS is so much better on the internet. You can do so much more with JAWS. When you know how to use VoiceOver on the web and you know how to use Windows spots and you know how to do content browsing and you know how to use hotspots and stuff like that, you can get as much done with equal amount of time as you can in JAWS. JAWS is definitely very good on the web. I'm not at all going to say it's not, but you have equal access to websites as long as you, as a proficient screen reader user, understand all the tips and tricks of using your screen reader. So in other words, if you don't take the time to learn VoiceOver on the Mac, you can't, and you know JAWS like the back of your hand, you can't make an educated, fair, and in good conscience make a comparison of the two using the web. I always use the example of fantasy sports because I play a lot of fantasy football and baseball, hockey, etc. And I can tell you from experience that I can jump on my PC or I can jump on my Mac or I can jump on my iOS device, and it's pretty much equal because I know what I'm doing. And that's not out of arrogance or anything like that. It comes from the fact that I've used VoiceOver for almost 20 years and I've used Windows for 30 plus years. So, of course, using a screen reader every day and knowing how to do workarounds and not being bothered by, partial inaccessibility or things that might not be labeled properly that catch and frustrate some other blind users, I just am able to get the job done. Because regardless of whether you're using JAWS or VoiceOver, you are going to have to become good at workarounds. And I know some blind people go up in smoke and get enraged when they hear that term. That is the nature of the beast as a blind screen reader user. Now, I mentioned this when I teach Safari on the Mac. I mention this when I teach Windows and whatever your choice of, whether it's Edge or whatever. It's just a matter of understanding that, the web is just not going to be a good place, an easy place to work. There are some websites that are very accessible and that are a pleasure to browse, and there are other websites that are just a disaster. Now, one of the things you have to understand, not to get lost because this is not a web browsing lesson, but I'm going to just make this statement, is that some developers do not understand the difference between low vision and screen readers. So they have these nice little accessibility widgets on their website, and you can play with these little accessibility widgets, and you can change the contrast, and you can change the font size, and you can do all kinds of cool things if you are low vision to make your browsing experience that much better. But that does not impact the screen reader. And some of these developers simply don't understand that there is a difference between making a website accessible to a low vision user as opposed to making accessible to a totally blind screen reader user. Big, 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 big difference. And that's the complaint. A lot of times when I do web accessibility investigations, that's the thing I get from developers is that, well, look, we have an accessibility widget on our site and it's been proven accessible by third party applications. I said, that's nice. I'm not a low vision user. I'm a blind screen reader user. There is a big difference. Your site is not accessible to my screen reader. And it doesn't matter whether I jump on a Mac with VoiceOver or I use JAWS, with Edge or Firefox or whatever. It's the same results. And this is the thing you have to understand. If you are believing or being told that, the web is totally different experiences for a Mac user with VoiceOver as opposed to a JAWS user, you're hearing it from somebody who doesn't know the screen readers equally well. And that's again, that's from my own experience of using both over the years. So that's a myth that really drives me crazy. As well. The other myth too, which I don't really hear as much as I used to, but I used to hear people say that, JAWS has got all, VoiceOver's got all these keyboard commands that are so involved. You got to do finger gymnastics and blah, blah, blah. And I used to laugh because what if you're using JAWS, you don't think there's keyboard commands that require gymnastics with your fingers? Seriously? I don't get where that myth came from, because if you know the JAWS commands, especially when you start getting into layered commands, you're pressing keyboard commands all over the place. And the thing about, with VoiceOver is if you do find that there are certain commands that you use regularly that are complex, take advantage of Numpad Commander, take advantage of Keyboard Commander, take advantage of Trackpad Commander. That will cut down quite a bit on your finger gymnastics. But again, remember what I said earlier about knowing your screen reader. If you know how to use your screen reader, you know the ins and outs of your screen reader, you're going to make your life a heck of a lot easier as a blind person trying to use your operating system. You start to learn how to use activities and hotspots, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself able to utilize various apps and situations that you probably wouldn't think of as a beginner. Knowing how to label items with VO slash, if you have sighted assistance, little things like this make the screen reader use just as equal as you can do in JAWS when you can label, items with JAWS as well. So you have equal capabilities on both situations, both platforms. And again, this is something that I just don't understand why it gets lost or why it's overlooked by some people. So how to get the most out of VoiceOver? It's pretty much the same. I've kind of touched on everything here and there, but it's the same lecture that I'm going to get that I would give a JAWS screen reader user, and as time would pass. Become familiar with the help system. Read the documentation. One thing that Freedom Scientific slash Vispero does really well in JAWS is they have a lot of online, I should say built-in or downloadable resources, training modules and stuff. You can get the same thing from the VoiceOver help system, from the VoiceOver user guide. You got to know your keyboard commands. You got to start memorizing keyboard commands. What I always encourage people in the beginning, because it serves two purposes, is I, kind of mention either the Notes app or text edit. Start to compile your own cheat sheet. Make a cheat sheet that has, first a primary list of just the most important keyboard commands. But what you want to do over time is to start organizing them or categorizing them in a way that will help you look them up quickly should you need to do so. And the two purposes this serves is, number one, it concretizes the keyboard commands because you're writing them down and using them. And number two, you use your VoiceOver skills for document management and editing at the same time. So it sort of takes, it's two birds with one stone, so to speak. So that's one of the reasons why I always encourage my users, regardless of screen reader and platform, to take the initiative to, create your own, cheat sheets. And be patient and persistent, and don't expect overnight success. It doesn't matter what you're learning, iOS, Mac, Windows, it doesn't come overnight. And again, going back to my original thing about being an experienced Windows screen reader user, it does not imply, infer, or insinuate that you're going to be a master Mac VoiceOver user overnight or in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. As my dad used to say, the more time you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. I always get a kick, and I've told this story to some of my clients, or not story, but I've told this situation. I've relayed this situation to many of my clients. I can't tell you the number of clients that I've worked with over the years where I'll do a review at the beginning of a lesson, and one of my first questions I'll ask them is, "Did you go over or did you practice what we covered last week?" And they will say something like this to me. "Oh yeah, I knew we were going to be working together, so I took about 20 minutes before you called to go over it." And my response to them is, "Well, what about the last 7 days? What have you been doing?" If you're not going to put the time and effort into learning this stuff, you can't bitch to the world that that it's too hard or that it doesn't do what you need it to do. Because if you're not practicing and you're not putting the time in, you're not going to get good at it. You're not going to memorize stuff. You're not going to create what I like to call sense memory or mechanical memory, where you just start to know. You just don't even have to think about it. I remember when I first learned to use VoiceOver in the Mac, and I typed up these on a Braille writer, a Perkins Brailler. I had about a dozen pages of keyboard commands and notes that I took over time when I was first learning VoiceOver. And I used to have this stack of sheets on my desk, and I was constantly going through them and stopping when I was doing things on the Mac and reviewing. And what happened was over a period of time, I started looking at those sheets less and less, and they eventually got pushed off to the side. And what happened was years later, I was cleaning out my office and renovating, and I found this sheath of Braille paper pages and a rubber band on one of my shelves covered with some other stuff. And I picked them up and I was like holding them going, "What the heck is this stuff?" And I started to read it and I burst out laughing because of how elementary my notes and how specific my keyboard command notes were, that are just second nature to me, that I teach people so many times a week. And it kind of really put it into perspective to me that, again, like my dad used to say, the more time you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. And it's again, what I said, I didn't roll out of the womb knowing this stuff. It took time and it took effort. But anybody who's on this call, if you want to be a proficient Mac user, if you want to be a proficient at any kind of assistive technology, you get back what you put into it. Some people have a harder time than others. That's another thing I always try to explain to people. Not everybody takes to this like a duck to water. Some people are very lucky. Some people have a very good knack of technology. They don't need to spend, as much time practicing and hearing and lecturing and listening to something to understand or to sort of come to terms with how to use features. It's like using the voiceover utility, teaching people system settings or teaching people how to edit documents on the Mac. You know, uh, some people pick it up so quickly. Other people, it's a struggle. It's when I teach the rotor concept on iOS. Some people pick that up so fast. Like I have one client right now that I was totally floored because I just went over it once and I'm listening to them. They have me on speakerphone and I'm listening to them do the rotor and they're reading the word by word and character by character and they're going over to mail and they're going down the action menu. And I'm just shaking my head going, holy cow, most of my clients, this takes a lesson or two before they start getting, comfortable with using the rotor and understanding how the rotor is used. So you as the individual, it's up to you. Me as a trainer, what I always try to emphasize to people that ask me about training people and, if they're interested in becoming trainers and teachers, the thing I try to emphasize is it's not about you as the trainer. You have to learn from the client. You have to understand what their technical capabilities are, how fast they pick up the stuff, what's the best approach to teaching them. Some people are lecture learners. I can just spend the hour lecturing. They either take notes or they just listen and then they go do it on their own. Other users are hands-on. They want to do stuff while you're teaching them that. And you as the trainer have to adjust to that. And you as the learner, the student or whatever you want to call it, whether you're taking formal lessons from somebody or you're not, you're doing it on your own. You have to understand what's best for your learning curve. How do you approach learning this stuff? I try to emphasize, regardless of Mac or PC, task-specific approaches, meaning that after you learn the basics of your screen reader, apply them to one task at a time. The problem with computers and iOS devices is users get lost in the big picture. They know this thing can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc., and they want to do it. They want to be able to use their mail. They want to be able to work with documents. They want to be able to browse the web. They want to use the calendar. They want to use third-party apps. You can't do that overnight. You have to tackle one task at a time because as you do that, your skills will grow, your keyboard familiarity will grow, and the next application you apply that to will become easier because all you're doing at that point is learning the application layout and how to approach using that application. So in other words, if you take all the time in the world working with mail, Apple Mail on the Mac or the Finder, by the time you move into Safari or the calendar, it should be so much easier for you to get around screens because at that point, you should just be focusing on actually using the app and getting the most out of app and not getting tripped up on keyboard commands or basic navigation questions and things like that. That's really what it comes down to is, the effort of the user and, taking their time and learning this stuff one step at a time. There's an old expression used in the military. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Eventually, you'll eat the whole boy. That's just what it comes down to. Now, as far as resources out there, another myth. I hear sometimes people still say, there's not a lot of material out there if you want to learn Mac. In 2024, April, you have a lot of places to go. Apple has accessibility pages. There's Apple Viz. There's my website. There's Cliff and Matt's website. There's a lot of teaching tools. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. You just put searches, internet searches for, voiceover, learning voiceover on the Mac, using voiceover with this, using voiceover for that. You're going to find tons and tons of resources. And as I always say, and those of you who have purchased my audio tutorial series, one of the first things I always say in every tutorial is I appreciate the fact that people come to me to learn what I have to teach, but I very much recommend that you learn from multiple sources. So you take classes from me, you take classes from Cliff and Matt, you do the iBug courses, the public library that Brad Schneider's teaching. All of these are fantastic resources for you to become better Mac users. Don't let people trick you or get you to believe that, there's not as much out there for you to use as a Mac user when you're learning in the beginning as the same as JAWS and Windows. Yeah, is there probably a lot more out there for JAWS and Windows and NVDA? Yeah, because you forget they've had a very, much more popular head start. And, it's a dime a dozen in some ways. I mean, it's amazing out there. And some of the prices that some of these folks for Windows material charge for getting, teaching modules and stuff is just amazing to me. I've had clients bring things to my attention that just blow my mind that somebody can, in good conscience. And I guess it still comes from the mentality of state agencies and the federal government buying quote unquote stuff for blind clients. But it blows my mind. And I always laugh if I have anybody who will tell me that my stuff is too high priced for blind users. And it's like, seriously? Just go out there and take a look at some of the stuff being sold out there for thousands and hundreds and thousands of dollars for modules. But believe me, guys, there's a lot of free stuff out there. There's a lot of free resources. Again, Matt and Cliff, awesome place to go. Tech Juggernaut. Cliff is going to give his information and where you guys can go for that. I have a lot of free stuff on my website. I point to a lot of resources out there. There are email lists all over the place that you can join for support. There's questions you can ask any Mac user who'll be willing to help you and give you advice. And it doesn't mean you have to get paid lessons from me or anybody else. Of course, I appreciate that if you do. But I'm not going to ever tell people that there's no free resources out there. There's plenty of places to look. And again, start with Apple. Apple's got some great accessibility stuff on their web pages. VoiceOver has help built into it on the Mac. VOH, Control Option or Caps Lock and the letter H, like in help, is a great place to start on the Mac, and you can go from there. And so you're never alone. You're never like hung out to dry out there. And just don't allow yourself to buy into the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that is often projected by some people out there. And I still think it does come, and again, John's opinion, emphasize that, John's opinion. I still believe it comes from some people that find that the Mac kind of threatens their livelihood. Because let's face it, I know some people want to deny it, but Apple's impact on the blindness world in the last 20 years, especially when it comes to blindness products, especially with iOS and third-party apps that you can get for free, that give you ability to scan documents, identify colors, GPS, etc., has turned the traditional quote unquote blindness industry on its ear. And this comes from somebody who sold products for 18 years, was a reseller for all the major vendors in the blindness and low vision world, Telesensory, Freedom Scientific, Blazy, Robotron, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't think for a second that VoiceOver on the Mac and VoiceOver on iOS has not impacted the Windows world and the blindness market in the last 20 years. It's why I got out of the market when I did in 2010. I was actually, for once in my life, smart enough to read the proverbial handwriting on the world, on the wall, and kind of quote unquote saw where this industry was going to be progressing in the future and why I got into training and out of selling products, because I just didn't think that, the market was shrinking. The wagons were being circled, and a lot of us small fish were being shut out of the pond because there was a lot of panic in the blindness industry because of the way that the traditional molds were being broken because of Apple's presence. And it wasn't like Apple directly did this. It's just the collateral damage, I guess you can call it, especially iOS. Man, the stuff that you can get on iPhones and iPads, color identifiers, eight, 900, $1,000. Product UPC scanners, $1,200. Now you can get on iOS for free through Seeing AI, Be My Eyes, etc. So again, it's just interesting to me that the impact that Apple has had. And again, this is not strictly coming from the Apple fanboy perspective. This is coming from a blind guy, 56 years old, who has experienced so much in the last 30 plus years. And just to kind of wrap this up before I take whatever Q&A is out there, I'm really happy with how the state of, could it be better? Everybody's blind. Some blind people have this ability to just keep, it could be so much better. We could have this and we could have that. Yeah, I agree. Are there still shortcomings? Are there still things that I'd love to see happen or us be able to do as blind people? Absolutely. But let's face it, in 2024, there's a lot to be thankful for as a blind users of technology. And I always try to emphasize this to my college students, where those of us who are old enough to remember, who went to college and high school with a braille writer, an old-fashioned typewriter, a tape recorder, having to rely on sighted people for virtually everything. There was no internet to look things up to. You actually had to go to this place called believe it or not, a library with books, and you had to look things up for yourself, and you had to read these things called books. They weren't electronically spoken to you. It's just how different the world has changed in the last, even the last 10, 15 years as us as blind people. So, embrace the technology. And, to me, as I said, I'm just glad that I have the ability to use, what's available to me out there, and that Apple and Microsoft and Freedom Scientific and everybody else has provided us with a vehicle for us to have this ability to be in touch with the world and to be able to do our jobs and our schooling and everything else that we need to do. So, I hope that doesn't get lost in my lecturing and my whatever you want to call it, preaching that I've done for the last hour plus. So again, I hope people weren't expecting a lesson per se. I just wanted to address these things because I know there are a lot of new users. I know there's some new people whose names were not familiar to me. Um, when they signed up for this first course. So I hope you're not turned off by this because the rest of these courses are going to be lessons on specific things that will be taught. So there will be information, important or otherwise, that will be conveyed. So I just hope you don't take this particular thing as an example of, what everything else is going to be like. This is just John blathering for the last hour on his own personal opinions. So I thank you for your patience. I thank you for attending this lesson.
Um, I have a fourth grade student who is just beginning to learn voiceover. Do you think that's a good age? Am I starting too early? Am I on track? What do you think about that age group?
I think 10 years ago I would have said it's too early, but I think in this day and age, you get sighted kids who learn computers when they're literally in kindergarten. So I think fourth grade to teach them voiceover and to use their Mac or iOS devices is not a bad idea. I think there's still a lot of material out there that is geared for younger users. And I have taught, not that young, but I have taught people 12, 13 years old in the past. So I don't think fourth grade is too early at all.
Okay. He uses a refreshable Braille display, a Braille Note Touch Plus. So we're thinking of trying to combine how he uses things. We had a little bit of success connecting our iPad via Bluetooth so he could access Bookshare with the voiceover commands and through but we've run into hiccups. Is that expecting too much? Should I concentrate on just learning voiceover first? What do you suggest?
I would probably have him learn voiceover a little bit, at least the basics first,
Okay.
and then, apply that to the Braille display usage. Only because I think it's just if you're kind of jumping into both worlds at the same time for that age. It's different when you have an adult who's got more a focus ability and maybe able to multitask, so to speak, better than a fourth grader. So I
Right.
think you might want to just take it in small bits and start with the voiceover component and then
Okay.
work your way over to the Braille display once he's kind of comfortable and has his feet under him.
I'm having to work on, I'm working on a project with somebody that unfortunately has to be in Word because it's their files and there's college professors involved. And I don't want to try to do it in Pages and convert it over. I've had a lot of trouble with Word for Mac. Do you happen to know if anybody teaches that? I had trouble last time I tried to use it with simple things like trying to select a line. And I don't know how much was my skill and how much was the implementation. Um,
The
but
trick with Word is interaction and being sure that you interact with the body of the text. The
mhm.
thing though with Word, it's funny because some Mac OS specific things don't work in Word.
Right.
So you really have to stick to VoiceOver. So if you wanted to highlight stuff, you want to go into selection mode with VO enter and then use like VO down arrow to select by line
Oh,
and then
that's
do VO enter again and do Command C because and again, it could just be my experience too, but at least with the 2019 Mac Mini Intel, I have a lot of problems with some Mac OS commands that just don't seem to work as expected. And I've just found that using the specific voiceover stuff works more, and there are some weird things about Word, but it is accessible. And there's a lot of stuff on the Microsoft accessible knowledge base. I do have a list of the Mac specific Mac specific word commands that I could send you if you just write to me
um
privately.
I have a YouTube playlist for John's materials on my Stir It Up. It's youtube.com/stirritupstudio. And stir is spelled with a U, so that's STURITUP. We also have more with the Mac that I teach from January to March This year we did 7 courses, and I think John is a part of 3 or 4 of them: word processing, Safari, and a couple others. And then of course ttjtech.biz, and all our websites, including John's, has free resources, ways to get a hold of us, even private email. So if you have questions that are quick and easy, we'll answer them. And there's other things that we can schedule free consultations or schedule one-on-one paid training. So all kinds of resources there.
And I will catch you guys later.
Remember, for all Mac, iOS, and any kind of Apple training, visit macfortheblind.com. John Panarese has some free courses and some reasonable paid courses. You won't be disappointed. See you next time.